So I have a 2016 Harley Davidson here that I'm changing fluids on today, and I'm going to give it like a once over, do tire pressures and lube stuff, and make sure there's nothing else going on with it. But I was asked to change all the fluids. I already started changing. I drained the transmission fluid, so just to show you a couple of things. I started doing it and decided to make a video. So this is your oil, your engine oil filler cap, and right in front of that you have a 3/8 Allen head that is the dipstick for your transmission oil. Now, I drained the transmission oil, and I started loosening up the oil drain plug. So I'm going to show you under here, right here. So under this frame section here, this is your transmission drain bolt, and I took that off, drained the transmission oil, remove the transmission dipstick when you do that so that it flows out better, and there's an O-ring that's on here. Always replace those O-rings. So I did replace the O-ring, of course. This is the old one right here. You can just see how terrible it is. It's in terrible condition. So, always replace those. It's a one-time use. They'll get pinched, they'll get cut, and they'll leak if you reuse them. So you can see right here in the front of the crankcase, this is your engine oil. So I've already started loosening the bolt up. We're gonna take it off the rest of the way here. I'm gonna inspect that O-ring. We'll show you right from the get-go. So you can see how flat and bad this O-ring is also. You can also see some pipe thread tape or sealant that's on there. It's not tape, it's actually sealant, but doesn't hurt to put some sealant on these threads also, just to make sure that there's no leaking going on after you're done. So always replace the O-ring, clean up all the old sealant, put a new sealant on there. And when you pull the engine drain plug, just like the transmission, have the cap loose inside here. Unscrew it, loosen it up with the dipstick so that there's no crankcase pressure built up and the oil will flow out properly. So while the engine oil is draining here, you can see it's just coming out a little bit, but I'm gonna let it come out as much as we can. We're gonna get as much of that old oil out as we can. It should just about fill up this pan I have, but this gentleman says he has not changed his oil in a long time. It's definitely overdue, so it's probably burned some of it away, and it's broken down, and it's very dirty. So that's what happens. He said he actually went on a ride and was starting to hear it sounded a little knocky. I could see why. It's probably like a quart low on oil. So while that's finishing draining, I have a funnel in here where the transmission goes, and I'm going to fill the transmission with oil. It takes pretty much a quart of oil inside here. It has a dipstick, so take your time. Don't put too much, don't put too little. Your dipstick has a couple of marks on it here where it's going to show you a little X. You want to be right in the middle of that X, basically. It could be on the lower side or on the high side, but you don't want it to be below that X, and you don't want it to be above that X. So anywhere in between those cross hatches there, and you are good to go. Now when you check it, you do want to screw the dipstick all the way in and take it back out. I don't know how well you can see that, but right at the top of the F mark. So absolutely perfect. Transmission is ready. And tighten this down. I like to tighten it down by hand till it's fully seated, basically. And then I go in there with my ratchet just give it a little tweak so it's snug. Don't ever want to over tighten that. You don't want to strip anything, break anything, and you want to be able to get it off next time. Same thing with the drain plugs. So just snug them up in there and then tweak them until they feel tight without over torquing them. I mean, the torque on it's probably about 15 to 17 foot-pounds, usually no more than that on any bike, so it doesn't take a lot. So I'm just gonna pop the dipstick out of here for the engine oil and give it another minute or two of dripping just to make sure everything's out, and then we'll finish up the oil and get the oil filter off as well. So taking a peek at the oil filter, you can see right here we have a sensor that there is a special oil filter cup that goes on this. It has a cutout for this. I do not have that, but I have a strap wrench that I put on here. Works perfectly fine. Never have issues getting it off. You can tell this one's definitely been on there for a while. It's very pitted and ugly looking, but so we're gonna get the oil filter off and start draining that, and then get back to putting the drain plug back into the motor. So as I had mentioned before, I'm gonna take this 1/4 inch Allen, and I like to stick it in here, and the center is an Allen. I like to go in as far as I can with that. Basically, I tend to tighten it with the Allen instead of the actual socket, just because that socket, you get better grip of it basically, and you don't want to over tighten anything. It's one of the worst things you could do is over tighten a drain bolt. Then you can't get the thing off, and that's not good for the next person that has to work on it. I loosen up the oil filter, and boy, I mean, that's the same way too. You don't want to over tighten an oil filter ever, but this oil filter was pretty loose on there. I barely touched it and the thing started moving on me, so that's not really a good thing either. You want to make sure it's snug without being over tight, of course, but I feel like it was not tightened properly last time. I'm just about seated in there. You can see it's still, if I just put a finger on it, it's still moving freely. It might look like I'm cranking on it, but I'm not. It's very freely moving, and right there is snug. So what I do is snug it up just a little bit more, and we're good. Got an O-ring in there, and you got sealant on the threads. It should not leak. Don't over tighten it. Just snug it up, tweak it till it's good. Alright, so we got the oil filter loose. I got the drain bucket right below it. And the oil tends to kind of travel in a few places here. So, might have to do a little cleanup after, but I'm going to stop the video right here for a second as I watch it drain and drip in the bottom. And I'm just going to need both of my hands, as I'm holding the phone with one, but I'm going to need both of my hands to take it off just to try to minimize the mess and then get the new one on. So I got the oil filter off, and I've cleaned the whole area with some brake cleaner, and always make sure that the old O-ring comes off of the oil filter. Make sure it's not on the case, and always put a little bit of oil. You don't need a lot so it's not spilling everywhere, but a little bit of oil inside the oil filter, and lubricate the new O-ring real well, and then just hand tighten it on there, and then snug it up with the wrench just a little bit so it doesn't come loose. So we got the new oil filter on. Like I said, put it on by hand, as tight as you can by hand, and then whatever you're using, a filter cup, strap wrench, whatever, just slightly tweak it, just a little bit. You don't have to crank on the thing. You don't want to make it very hard. The worst thing is to have a seized oil filter or too tight of an oil filter when you go to change it next time and you can't get it off. It gets crushed. You usually have to pierce it with something to get it off, or do all kinds of crazy things. So just snug. Doesn't have to be too tight. It has a big O-ring, makes a nice seal. So just by hand actually is typically pretty good. depending on how tight you can get it on by hand. Like I said, a little tweak with the wrench is good, and you're done. So we have the oil filter on, we have the oil drain plug in. Now it's time to fill the engine with oil. So we got the funnel in here. I'm going to start filling the motor with the oil. Takes about 5 quarts. So if for some reason you put in 3 quarts and it's already at the full mark on the dipstick, that means you didn't get all the oil out. Something happened, something's not right. So just to show you here on the dipstick. So this dipstick shows 2 different measurements, whether you're on the jiffy stand or straight up. And as long as it's in between those little honeycombs, you're good. You want it definitely as central as you can to maybe upper, but as oil does heat up, it expands a little bit. So you don't want it ever at the very top of the full mark, and you definitely don't want it at the low. You can see where it says add there to the left and where it says full to the right. Right in the center is perfect. So we got the primary here, so the drain bolt is right underneath here. Same size as the engine and the transmission. Same thing, replace the O-ring on it. And then you're going to take off this cover here. It's 5 T27 bolts. Take off that cover, and then you're going to need a small funnel to stick in here to fill it. Pretty much takes a quart to fill this. So it's just about done draining. So we're going to put the drain bolt back in there in a minute and fill it with oil. And all the oils will be changed, and this bike will be all set with fresh fluids. Always inspect this O-ring gasket that's on the inside of the primary cover. It is reusable, but always check it to make sure there's no tears or anything like that, because then you definitely want to replace it. This one looks to be in good condition, so there should be no issues. Alright, so we're all filled here. It might be tough to see on camera. You might be able to see a little sheen, but it's about right here or so. When the bike is straight up, you should just be able to see the oil here without coming out of the case, of course, or coming out of any areas. So you know, it's pretty much a quart, a little less maybe, but that's it. I'm done changing all the fluids. I'm gonna go through the bike and just lube like you know, a couple spots of linkages and pivot points. You know, I like to even lube these from time to time just to make sure they're free, any highway pegs, passenger pegs. I'm gonna do tire pressures and should be done. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you know how to change your own fluids now. If not, take them to me. Please like and subscribe to these videos, and just hope to see you on the next one. Alright, so we've got the oil all set, the transmission all set. Now we're moving on to the primary. So the primary is right here, right under the cover. This is your drain bolt here. And after we drain it, we're going to stand the bike upright, straight, and we're going to have to take off this cover here to fill it. So it's all these Torx here. So come off. There's a gasket back here. Always inspect that gasket. Make sure it's good. It is reusable, as long as it's in good condition. And so we're going to drain the primary now.